The most notorious events in ADX Florence history: fires, incidents, and crackdowns. Before we begin, if you're ready for a story darker than the deepest cell block and more twisted than any case file you've ever heard, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what mystery you want exposed next. Now, welcome to the place they call the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Let's step inside. It started with smoke. Not the kind that rises from a kitchen fire or a careless spark in a trash can, but the thick, choking kind that curls under steel doors and drifts across the most secure prison floor in America. ADX Florence, a fortress of concrete buried deep in Colorado, designed to silence men who had brought chaos to entire cities. Yet on that cold November morning, chaos found a way back in. At 6:14 a.m., the alarm blared through Range 13, one of the most restricted units in the entire facility. Officers sprinted down the tier, boots pounding, radios crackling with half-finished sentences. "We've got smoke, possible fire." Multiple alarms triggered, but there was something else. Something wrong. The fire wasn't coming from a cell. It was coming from an electrical maintenance corridor that inmates had no access to. Or, at least, that's what everyone believed. Officer Daniel Mercer was the first to reach the door. He'd worked at ADX for 12 years and had seen things the public would never hear about. Riots stopped before they began. Inmates who hadn't spoken in years suddenly screaming at shadows. Coded threats scrawled on the backs of meal trays. But this was different. When he pushed open the heavy door, a blast of heat and dark smoke hit him so hard he stumbled back. Inside, something was burning that shouldn't have been there at all. A pile of shredded documents. Bundles of torn wiring. And, most chilling, a hand-carved wooden matchstick lying on the floor, charred at the tip. There were no wooden matches allowed in ADX Florence. Not for inmates. Not for staff. Not for anyone. Mercer stared at it, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Someone had planned this. Someone with access, knowledge, and a message to send. But the day wasn't finished with him yet. As the fire crew extinguished the flames and the ventilation system kicked into emergency mode, the warden ordered an immediate lockdown. Every inmate was confined to their cell. Guards were stationed at every corner, and a specialized investigative team was brought in. Their job: figure out who had started a fire in one of the most secure places on Earth. The first clue came from surveillance footage. One camera, positioned directly above the maintenance hallway, had gone black at 5:52 a.m., 22 minutes before the smoke alarms triggered. A deliberate blackout. Someone had sabotaged it. The tech team pulled the feed, rewound it, and slowed down the last frame recorded before the camera cut off. The hallway was empty until a thin sliver of movement appeared at the far edge of the frame. A shadow. A silhouette.
Tall. Lean.
Moving fast. No face. No uniform. No identifiable features. And then static. The investigators shifted their attention to the inmates housed closest to the corridor. The names on that list weren't the kind you said out loud, without lowering your voice. Men serving life sentences for crimes that shook entire nations. Men who had been involved in previous escape attempts, plots, and violent incidents. But one stood out. In cell 213. Inmate Marcus Hale. A former intelligence contractor turned saboteur. A man the government once trusted with secrets that couldn't be spoken outside sealed rooms. Hale had been at ADX for 7 years, and during that time, he had barely said a word to anyone. But he was known for something far more troubling. He understood systems. Electrical grids. Digital networks. Security weaknesses. And he had once been caught attempting to smuggle coded drawings through his commissary orders. When investigators reached his cell, Hale was standing perfectly still, hands behind his back, staring at the floor like a man listening to a song no one else could hear. "Did you see anything unusual this morning?" Mercer asked. Hale looked up with calm, steady eyes. "Unusual? Everything here is unusual." It was the first sentence he had spoken in nearly 4 years. And that wasn't the only surprise. During a search of his cell, officers discovered something hidden inside his legal paperwork. A simple line drawn in pencil. At first glance, it looked random, but when they connected the dots, it formed a layout. Not of ADX Florence, but of its electrical system. Every wire, every panel, every emergency override point. Someone had been planning something far more elaborate than a fire. And as Mercer leaned over the drawing, a cold realization crept down his spine. This wasn't sabotage. It was a test, a dry run, and the fire was only the beginning. But things took a darker turn when one of the investigators radioed in, voice shaking with something close to fear. "We've got a problem." We opened the restricted storage room connected to the corridor. "You need to see this." Mercer rushed over. The door was forced open, and inside, one of the facility's emergency access keys was missing. A key that could open almost any internal door in the prison. A key no inmate should ever even know existed. As the warden stared into the empty hook where the key once hung, one thought echoed through every corner of ADX Florence. Someone inside the most secure prison in America now had the power to unlock its darkest secrets. And when they opened the locked metal cabinet at the back of the room, what they found changed everything. The metal cabinet should have held nothing more than spare parts, bolts, wires, and emergency repair tools. But when the officers pulled it open, the room fell silent. Inside, neatly folded, wrapped in a dull gray cloth, was something that sent a wave of unease through everyone present. A full maintenance uniform.
Clean.
Untouched. Perfectly folded. As if someone had been preparing for a moment they knew would come. And beneath the uniform, a laminated access card.
Real. Scannable.
Without a single scratch. No inmate should have been able to get this close to such an item. The possibility hit them hard. Someone with authority had either been compromised or had willingly participated. The investigation shifted instantly. This wasn't an internal prank or an inmate acting alone. This was coordinated. Calculated. Someone was rewriting the rules inside ADX Florence. Officer Daniel Mercer felt a tightening in his chest. He had spent his career believing that this place, this supermax of all supermaxes, was impenetrable. But the fire, the stolen key, and now the uniform changed the entire playing field. Whoever orchestrated this had knowledge, patience, and a motive powerful enough to risk everything. And the one man who might know something about it, Marcus Hale, was sitting in cell 213, silent once again. By noon, the investigative team had pulled every access log, every entrance, every exit, every time an ID badge had been used in the last 30 days. They expected a long list. Instead, they got something almost impossible. During the exact 4-hour window, when the uniform could have been planted, no maintenance badge was scanned at all, which meant the card in the cabinet wasn't just stolen. It had never been logged. It was off the record. "How is that possible?" Mercer asked. The tech specialist swallowed. "It isn't, unless someone created a duplicate outside the system. A ghost badge. A phantom identity. A way to walk through the prison unnoticed. That left 2 suspects, a highly skilled inmate or a staff member, hiding in plain sight. But before that mystery could be fully analyzed, the prison jolted with another shock. At 3:20 p.m., the lights in range 13 flickered once, twice, then died completely. ADX Florence was plunged into darkness. Emergency lights kicked in a second later, but the flicker had been long enough for surveillance feeds to glitch and reset. In the middle of that blackout, one camera, pointing directly at cell 213, captured a flash of movement. Someone had reached Hale's door and slid something underneath it. When Mercer saw the footage, his blood ran cold. The silhouette was the same shape seen earlier in the corridor, a tall, lean figure moving with speed and purpose. The warden ordered a full tactical sweep. Every cell door on the range was triple-checked. Hale's was first. When they opened it, Hale was sitting on his bed, calm as ever. But Mercer immediately saw what didn't belong there, a folded slip of paper tucked under his shoe. He stepped forward. "Don't move." Hale didn't even blink as Mercer picked it up. Inside was a single sentence, written in thin, sharp handwriting. "If you want the truth, follow the smoke." No signature. No identifiers. But the message was clear. Whoever was orchestrating this wanted Hale involved. Or needed him. The warden leaned in, voice low. Is he working with someone on staff? Mercer shook his head slowly. I don't think this is inmate to inmate. Whoever passed this note, he paused. They're walking these halls like they belong here. That evening, tensions escalated. Staff members were questioned. Access points were sealed. But the unease only grew heavier, creeping through every corridor like the last traces of the morning smoke. And then it happened. An officer sprinted toward the operations center, panic pouring off him. We've got a situation in the old administrative wing.
You need to see this right now.
The administrative wing hadn't been used in years. It was a leftover from when ADX Florence had first opened, still intact, still wired, but mostly abandoned except for archived storage. When Mercer and the investigative team arrived, flashlights beam cutting through the dim space, they saw the door lock had been pried open. Fresh scrape marks lined the metal. Someone had forced their way inside. A smell lingered in the air, faint, chemical, almost metallic. The room's interior had been ransacked. Filing cabinets forced open, boxes emptied, papers scattered across the concrete. But one thing stood out immediately. Someone had torn out several pages from the oldest binder in the room, the original construction plans of ADX Florence. Not the public blueprints. The buried ones. The ones detailing blind spots and escape routes that had never been activated. Mercer felt a chill. Someone is studying this place like a map. And then he saw it, on the wall, above the overturned cabinet. A message scratched into the paint. Not written.
Carved.
Phase 1 complete. A silence settled in the room. A heavy, suffocating silence that made even the officers shift uneasily in their boots. If there was a Phase 1, there was a Phase 2. And ADX Florence wasn't prepared for what that might be. But things reached a breaking point when a second message was found on the floor beneath the cabinets. Another slip of paper, half burned at the edges. Mercer picked it up carefully. When the smoke returns, the walls will open. Before he could process the meaning, Hale's voice echoed from behind him, steady, emotionless. You should have listened. You're already too late. Mercer spun around. Hale stood in the doorway, escorted by guards, but his expression was disturbingly calm. What do you know about this? Mercer demanded. Hale tilted his head slightly. Everything you fear. And everything they're planning. Who's they? Mercer pressed. Hale gave a thin smile, one that held no warmth. You'll find out, he said softly, when Phase 2 begins. And then, somewhere deep within the prison, an alarm began to ring. A different alarm. One that hadn't sounded in over a decade. The breach alarm. The sound of the breach alarm didn't echo, it pounded. A sharp, metallic wail that ricocheted through every hallway, every cell block, every corner of ADX Florence like a warning from the building itself. It was a sound designed to freeze blood because it meant one thing. Someone had compromised the most secure prison in the United States. Officer Daniel Mercer raced toward the control room, boots slamming against concrete as red lights pulsed overhead. Talk to me, he shouted, pushing through the door. The operations team was already scrambling, eyes wide, fingers flying across keyboards. The tech specialist pointed at the screen. We've got an unauthorized system override attempt. Someone is trying to bypass the internal gate locks. Mercer stared at the monitor. A digital progress bar flashed red. Gate override, 27% complete. His stomach dropped. If the override hit 100%, the electronic barriers separating units, corridors, and secured wings could open. Not all at once, but enough to create chaos. Enough to give someone exactly the distraction they needed. Shut it down, Mercer ordered. We can't, the tech replied. Whoever's doing this, they're not in the external network. They're inside the prison system. A traitor. A mole. Someone with deep access. Before Mercer could respond, another officer rushed in, breathless. Sir, something else. Cameras in the lower mechanical tunnels are down. Someone's moving in the dark. Mercer felt a cold sweat forming at the base of his neck. The mechanical tunnels ran beneath ADX Florence, narrow passageways staff rarely entered alone. If someone got control of those, they could vanish. Or worse, They could appear anywhere. Meanwhile, Marcus Hale sat in an interrogation room, hands chained, expression unreadable. On the table in front of him, the stolen blueprint fragments were covered from the administrative wing. Mercer stormed in. Phase 2. What is it? Hale glanced at the papers calmly. You already know. You just haven't admitted it yet. Mercer slammed a fist down on the table. People's lives are at stake. Hale finally met his eyes. People's lives have always been at stake in this place. You built a pressure cooker. You sealed it shut. And you forgot that even concrete cracks. Who's helping you? Mercer demanded. Hale exhaled a slow breath, almost disappointed. Still asking the wrong question. Then, what's the right one? Hale leaned forward. Not who but why. Before Mercer could reply, a new alarm erupted. Deeper, heavier, slower. The fire alarm. Smoke detection in multiple zones again. The room filled with radio chatter. Smoke in the mechanical tunnels. Heat signatures detected, unknown source. Possible ignition points in 3 separate wings. Hale smiled faintly. Told you. Follow the smoke. The response team moved fast, sweeping through the lower tunnels. The moment Mercer entered, he felt the temperature rise. The air was heavy, not thick smoke like before, but something burning just out of sight. Officers spread out, flashlights slicing through the darkness. It didn't take long to find the first ignition point. A small pile of rags soaked in a heating chemical. Enough to produce smoke, not enough to start a real fire. A decoy. The second point was the same. And the third. A pattern, intentional, calculated, designed for maximum panic. Mercer felt a knot tighten in his chest. They're pulling staff resources away from the real target. Which is what? An officer asked. Mercer didn't answer. Not because he didn't want it, but because the realization hit him like a punch. The uniform. The ghost badge. The missing emergency key. This wasn't about escape. It was about access. He turned sharply. We're going to the archive vault. Now. The archive vault was where ADX Florence kept its most confidential files, inmate profiles, classified behavior logs, unreported incidents, and decades of sealed investigations. When Mercer and the team arrived, a chill ran through the group. The door was already open. Inside, rows of shelves stood undisturbed, except one. The shelf containing the restricted historical incident files. 27 binders were missing. On the floor, a single binder sat open, pages scattered. Mercer knelt beside it, picking up a sheet. His eyes widened. These are internal misconduct reports. Suppressed investigations. Old cases that were never made public. Another sheet. More suppressed incidents. Another. Cover-ups. Retaliation accusations. Abuse complaints filed and buried. Officer Reynolds, trembling, whispered, "Someone is stealing everything the prison ever tried to hide." Mercer swallowed hard. They're not trying to escape ADX Florence. He stood, his voice low and grim. They're trying to expose it. In that moment, a radio crackled. "Sir, we found the missing binders. They're in the central atrium." Mercer frowned. Why would they leave them there? A pause. They're arranged in a circle. Mercer's pulse spiked. A circle? Yes, sir. And there's someone sitting in the middle. Who? Static. Then, you're not going to believe this. Mercer sprinted through the corridors until he reached the atrium. And there, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by the missing binders like a ritualistic pattern, was Hawkins, a veteran maintenance supervisor who had worked at ADX for 26 years. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with soot, his hands shaking. 4 officers held him at gunpoint. Mercer approached slowly. "Hawkins, what did you do?" The old man lifted his head, eyes hollow. "What needed to be done?" Mercer glanced at the binders. "You caused the fire. You planted the uniform, the badge, the notes." Hawkins nodded weakly. "I watched this place destroy men for decades. I documented everything, every cover-up, every crackdown, every incident they told us to forget. But no one listened. Not until I found someone who could help me make them listen. Mercer felt a cold dread settle in. Hail, he whispered. Hawkins' eyes gleamed. He showed me how to make the whole world look. And phase 2? Mercer asked quietly. Hawkins looked around the atrium, breathing hard. This is phase 2. Mercer frowned. Then what's phase 3? Hawkins almost smiled. Oh, that part isn't mine. Before Mercer could question him further, a distant explosion rocked the floor, not destructive, but loud enough to send a shockwave of fear through the entire facility. Security radios erupted. Sir, someone triggered the external broadcast channel. It's streaming live. All the sealed files, they're being transmitted. Every secret, every misuse of power, every buried incident at ADX Florence, now being leaked to the world. Mercer turned toward the hallway leading back to Range 13. Marcus Hale was gone. His escort incapacitated. His cell wide open. And a final message scratched into the wall. Truth is the only escape. The world would remember the fires, the incidents, the crackdowns, but no one would forget the day someone turned the most secure prison in America inside out. And as sirens wailed across the Rockies, Mercer whispered to himself, "If you thought this was the end, you're not ready for what comes next."